Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. I'm recording today from Oklahoma on our little Texas tour of events for AEW. I just thought I'd come home and chill at Oklahoma for a few days.
When's the last time you were there?
For my granddaughter's graduation about 2.5, 3 months ago.
Is it weird to be away from home that long?
Yeah. I have to remember. I don't have a recall of a lot of passwords and all this stuff, including Zoom and things like that. And in Jacksonville, I've done it so much; it's just automatic. Everything's set up.
Yeah.
Here, I had to do a little IT work, which for me, probably not the greatest thing in the world, but nonetheless, here we are. So, and I'm looking forward to the show. It should be pretty good. And I've been having a lot of fun on the road. The ratings of AEW has been good, and crowds have been good. It's just so that show we had in Austin a week or so ago was just off the charts, and it got good ratings. Obviously, it was according to the PR. I get
more than 1 million folks.
Yeah, it was #1 show on cable Wednesday night.
Hard to beat, man.
So. With my John Wayne mug in hand, I'll say congratulations to the team. So anyway, how are you been?
Man, better than I deserve. Excited to be back with you. Of course, I wasn't able to record last week. I was on a little vacay, so Paulie Bromwell did his best Conrad Thompson impression, and I hear it went well.
He did. He did a good job. He's a good hand. So he's not Conrad Thompson, for God's sakes. But he did a good job. Seriously, he did a real good job. He was well prepared and had his game face on, and so we had some fun. So Paulie did a good job for us.
Well, and we're excited about today's topic. We're going to be covering, one of the hottest pay-per-views of all time, Invasion from 2001. Just to add some context to where we are at this point in 2001, we're on the heels of the biggest WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17. But sadly, that's where we turn Steve Austin heel. The Rock goes off to make a movie, and the business starts to hit the skids until this pay-per-view. The show we're talking about today is the most successful non-WrestleMania pay-per-view ever for the World Wrestling Federation, which really, when you think about it, is pretty remarkable. And I know people like to poke fun at the Invasion angle and talk about how it was bungled and what could have been. But man, fans were bought in for this pay-per-view, and it was a huge success financially.
Yeah, it was big. It's surprisingly good. I think we all thought it might be solid, let's say, but it was more than solid. It was outstanding, and it was. I think the reason that people wanted to see something new is a new concept in that respect, where two brands are kind of dueling So it was a successful show, and I remember it fondly. But you or I, either one can't dwell on what could have been, what should have been, how could we follow up, could we have done better. The bottom line is always still going to be the fact that we didn't have all the players,
right?
And somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you get them? Because they were under contract, making a lot of money
to do nothing.
They were able to heal their wounds. None of them were spring chickens. They wanted to. They had that mailbox money coming in, which is the very best kind. So I was pleasantly surprised it did so well. It was a fun show to broadcast too.
Well, and we're going to get into the show, but I think what most fans are really interested in is what could have been. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit before we get going. There was talk when this whole angle started that perhaps Raw was going to become a WCW show and SmackDown was going to be a WWF show. There's several different versions of concepts that you guys kicked around, including a late night show, et cetera, et cetera. But do you remember there ever being a discussion that, hey, maybe we'll make the Monday show the WCW brand?
Well, I'm sure I would assume all options are being explored.
Right.
Long discussions about Monday Night Raw becoming a non-WWE brand show. I don't recall that, but it certainly could have happened because, like I said, everything was on the table. We're cleaning the slates. We're going to start over. How could we make all this work? And we could have supported a WCW show again, Conrad, if we had the players. We didn't have the players to run the offense that we wanted to run, and we weren't going to get them. So it wasn't a matter where Vince should open his checkbook and shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback these things, but consequently, I think that everything was on the table. But it still comes back to the same thing, man. And I sound redundant, and I apologize, but we didn't have Goldberg, and we didn't have Hall and Nash, and we didn't have Hogan. There's a lot of, we didn't have a lot of elements that we needed to make this thing really a impressive brand. So, but I was happy that the show did well, and it gave everybody some hope. I think that, maybe there's life, and especially for the talent, they saw they could participate in a successful event, and it may give them that second chance, that second life. And so that's kind of where we were on that deal. I've thought about this show and the invasion situation many, many times. What if, but God Almighty, you can drive yourself crazy on the what if shit. So anyhow, but it was a fun experience. It was a very hectic time for me personally, because trying to blend two rosters together. And you find out there's little rivalries, and the WCW loyalty still existed and all those things. And, so it was just it was ill-fated, but we got that one good pay-per-view out of it. I thought, that I was under the hope that we would do more than that one. I thought we should, because it had a concept, it worked. And so, and the show was pretty good, but Vince didn't want to do a second show. So that's his call.
So let's talk a little bit about King of the Ring. We're coming off of that show where we had really the first WCW versus WWF showdown. It was DDP and Undertaker. We've also seen Booker T accidentally injure the franchise. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Chris Benoit is going to have surgery to repair his nagging neck. And man, the hits just keep on coming. It feels like 2001, sort of post WrestleMania, the roster was feeling snake bit. Would that be fair to say? Oh,
well, yeah. And it's a good thing that I have pencils with erasers on them.
Yeah.
Because, man, there was a lot of booking changes. And, then that just leads to other things. You can't have accurate advertising when, the spots are sent out, and then all of a sudden you're in the loop of trying to catch up and give the audience that's buying tickets the right card. Well, all kinds of things that you probably wouldn't think about. But yeah, nonetheless, it was just when you lose that many quality talents, I'm shocked that, that it would have brought a lot of companies right to their knees, and it down near brought us to our knees, because our top guys are becoming unavailable for a variety of reasons.
let's talk about developmental, because that's what wrestling fans want. You often tell us here on the show, wrestling fans want new. Yep. Obviously we've got a new set of faces here from WCW, but what's the next big thing? You're revamping developmental in this era. MCW and Terry Golden are out. HWA and Les Thatcher are in. Why wasn't Memphis Championship Wrestling working out for you?
Well, I don't know Terry Golden personally, to any degree. I think that was part of it, just the fact that we didn't have the infrastructure in Memphis. They were still trying to do things the Memphis way, which is cool. In Memphis, it worked for decades, but we needed something different. We needed a training ground, and we needed to run live events. And that was the whole key of doing the developmental area, where you could get out of the gym, so to speak, and get on the road a little bit, run small shows, so these guys could learn to work in front of a paying crowd. And I don't think that was a top priority in Memphis. So, and I had a great personal relationship with Les Thatcher, still do. And Cincinnati was a good area to stick some guys in and let them continue to learn their craft, but nothing compared to OVW. Cornette and Danny Davis they were head and shoulders above everybody else on the developmental side and what it needed to be. They got it. It wasn't, we didn't have to have meeting after meeting. They got it. And then they made it even better. So OVW was a key in the success of the development of a lot of guys that made millions of dollars for Vince.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket. So what are you waiting for? Hurry to savewithconrad.com. I want to mention too, when this Memphis developmental closes down, that means Joey Matthews, Brian Danielson, and Brian Kendrick are all going to be released. It's pretty crazy to think that they were all under the WWE banner in developmental, but them's the breaks. It's hard to compare, I guess, but how would you compare what Jim Cornette and Danny Davis were doing in OVW compared to all the other developmental territories? Because that does feel like the one that maybe had the most success.
Head and shoulders above.
Yeah.
They had, we had Rip Rogers was there doing some coaching, training. He's great, still is. And Cornette had that booking mind that he's always had. So they did a good job. We just let them. We didn't put any qualifiers on it, Conrad. We didn't say, okay, we want Batista to be a heel. We want him to be called Leviathan. We didn't come up with that. That was Cornette and Danny doing that deal. So we didn't hamstring them any. We just look. Here's the talents. We're paying them. If we can make them a little extra money, that's great. But you do what you want to do. Do what's going to help your territory. And hopefully what's going to help draw some money and get some people in the building. Because again, that's the bottom line. Wrestling in front of a live audience is key. It's imperative. So, but they were just phenomenal. And, there's always going to be political deals. You get some guys in the office that are creative that says, well, Brian Danielson is too small. Brian Kendrick is too small. And that carried a lot of weight in that era, unfortunately. I thought Brian Danielson was a brilliant prospect, and but unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of support in that regard. But we saw how that worked out.
Yeah, he did okay.
Yeah.
Somebody else who's going to do okay, but maybe not much better in the WWE is Mike Awesome. He appears for the first time at Madison Square Garden and wins the hardcore title. It's pushed as a big moment, and of course, MSG is the WWF's home in this era. But it's almost, a little different to see him in the WWF. I was a big fan of what he did in Japan. And of course, in ECW, I don't know that WCW really did him justice, but it doesn't feel like he ever caught on with Vince McMahon. Why do you think that is? He had the size, he had the look.
He didn't connect to the audience. It's the intangible thing that you can't color or smell or paint a color on or whatever. And he just didn't have the charisma to connect with the audience. He was a mechanic and sometimes could be a little bit too stoic, I think, maybe. So, but so what we're saying is that my opinion that Bryan Danielson should have been nurtured and brought along got trumped by Mike Awesome. Okay, well, hell, that don't make any sense in hindsight. Now, at the time, of course, like you said, size is at a premium. Vince loves the big guys.
Yeah,
he's lessened that desire, seemingly anyway, here in the last few years, which is smart. You got to get the best players on the field, Conrad, and they're not all going to look alike, and that's the key thing. So I thought that, I like Brian Kendrick. I thought Brian Kendrick had an upside. But again, the size aspect just bit them in the ass, and that was no fault of theirs. But that's what the consensus was. And then again, you've got writers who have influence of Vince in the creative meetings because they're in front of him all the time for several hours a day at times. And, you know, they didn't have a good feel for it. They didn't have a feel for Brian, for Kendrick, or for Bryan Danielson. And of course, but they knew Vince loved big guys, so they're going to throw their hat in that ring because they don't want to cross the boss. So it wasn't objective and it wasn't a good decision, but there were a lot of things that were questionable decisions at that point in time that were very frustrating.
Let's talk about Kurt Angle and Steve Austin. Both of these guys are hurt and they're trying to work hurt, but even if they can't necessarily go inside the squared circle, it doesn't mean they can't contribute to the show. They start their, shall we say, odd couple routine, and it's super entertaining, but it is helping them rest their bodies. But there's an old adage, and I'm curious your stance on it. Funny doesn't draw money. What'd you think of what they did with Kurt Angle and Steve Austin and that old adage, funny don't draw money?
Well, here's the thing. What do you want to see? You want to see two great stars like Austin and Kurt do comedy, or do you want to see them get in the ring and fight with somebody, wrestle, compete? And we couldn't provide that second option. They weren't cleared. So the only way we could get them on the show and still use their star power and their name identity was to put them in an element that they could fulfill. And that was the comedy stuff, the singing and the little hats and all that stuff. Austin couldn't play the guitar no more than you and I could.
Right.
He may be a virtuoso, hell, I don't know, but nonetheless, I'm not. I don't know if I could even hold one correctly, but nonetheless, that was kind of the deal. You're left with fewer options. So yeah, if you want Austin on the show, here's how you got to use him. And it was just, that string of injuries. If people go back and look and do a little checklist, who all was hurt, who all was not, basically who all was unavailable for whatever reason. It's scary, but somehow we made it through. And also it kind of opened the door for some new guys to start getting a chance, to getting some minutes. And they maximized their minutes by and large, all of them.
Somebody else who's maximizing their minutes, Tori Wilson. She finds herself in an angle with Vince McMahon. Of course, we're trying to do an angle here to set up splitting of the shows. And I believe the original idea is there would be a divorce between Vince and Linda. But in the meantime, that means Tori's going to be palling around with Vince McMahon on camera. I feel bad for Vince having to pretend to make out and be in love with Tori Wilson. It was a hard day at the office for the old man, wasn't it?
Yeah, it must have been challenging to show any affection toward one of the most beautiful women in the world. And she was always a great team player too. She had to do some stuff that some ladies would probably stand on their own ego and say, I can't, I'm not going to, that's not me. Well, look, it's a scenario. She's cast in a fictional presentation. This is her role. This is how she was cast. And casting is just another word for booking. So, yeah, it was challenging, but there's where the writers could influence Vince more, Conrad, because that was more of their specialty than it was looking at matches and seeing how certain talents could pair up with another talent and equal a great match and put that on television. A lot of them weren't comfortable doing that. They had no experience, but a lot of them had experience and just I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word, but they just had they had more familiarity with that sort of angle than they did with putting a wrestling program together. So it's like Pat Patterson used to be a funny guy and had loved the humor, the ha-has you've heard everybody say. But, you know, he's the kind of guy, and we had others that could put a wrestling match together, and they could see talents and how they worked and use that knowledge and that observance to put the right guys with the right guys so they could produce a good match. So everybody was playing to their strengths. And, you know, no matter what anybody says, and this is not a knock on Vince or anybody else, but the bottom line is everybody there was trying to appease Vince. And they still are, I would think. Why wouldn't you? He's the head honcho.
And this has got to be such a challenging time for the company. I mean, really, let's just briefly run through this. You're buying WCW, you're closing the XFL, the WWF New York, the Times Square restaurant is running hard. And oh, by the way, we're going to start a TV show, a reality TV show called Tough Enough. This is all happening at the same time, Jim.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, do I know? Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was challenging. And in hindsight, Conrad, you know, maybe they wouldn't do it today. Maybe there's enough wrestling people around in that world that would influence to go another direction. But the staff wise, you know, you play to your strengths, and some of those guys in the writing area had more strengths in doing sports entertainment than they did pro wrestling. And to the point that, you know, we weren't even allowed to say pro wrestling. You never heard me say pro wrestling on television and at WWE. If you did, it was a rare occurrence. And if you did, you know, I got my ass chewed out for doing it.
So let's talk a little bit about when the world changes. Buff Bagwell and Booker T have a match in Tacoma. You're not at ringside for the match as Arn Anderson and Scott Hudson take your place, but you're backstage. We all know the match was, less than awesome. Tell me what's going on backstage and Vince's reaction as this match is going down.
He was not happy. He felt like it was below our standards. And, you know, Scott Hudson had a lot of experience there in Atlanta, in that area. Smart guy, good guy. And Arn was one of the great promo guys. You find out real quick, there's a distinct difference in doing promos and doing commentary. Major difference. So, but we thought Arn was such an impressive talker that he could do the commentary, and he knew the game and knew the, you know, insides and all that stuff. Knew where to go, not to go, or did he? So I don't think either one of those guys had a chance to work together. So I'm not aware that they got a chance to do a run through of any kind. So how they could be expected to be really, really good is kind of beyond me, quite frankly. So, but the match was not good, and it just didn't move the needle. As a matter of fact, it took it to the other direction, and Vince lost a lot of confidence in the fact that we might be able to do something with WCW because we put two guys that we thought could have a real good match. You know, Booker T is one of the best ever. It just didn't work that night, and he was not happy. And of course, the slow death then began in Seattle or Tacoma, or where the hell it was.
Do you remember let's talk about the announcing gig for a minute, because obviously this is something you're probably on top of. It made the Observer. Hudson had talked. We're talking about the announcer here, Scott Hudson, who you may remember from WCW. He had this one-off match where he and Arn called it, but here's the Observer write-up. Hudson had talked with JR a few months back when he came to Atlanta, and Ross gave him the impression he would be strongly considered for an announcing job. This was when they were under the impression WCW would have the Saturday night late time slot on TNN, and when that fell through, nobody was called back. Hudson wrote Ross a few weeks ago, noting he had until June 15th to make a decision as to whether or not to go back full-time at work with his government job or to continue working part-time. At his work, he had been switched to part-time because of all the time he spent working out of the office for WCW. Ross did get back to Hudson before telling him that in the short term, there was nothing that appeared to be on the horizon for him, which is likely because Joey Styles seemed to be the prime candidate for the WCW job. So Hudson then informed his bosses at his government job he's coming back full time. Then, with the plans to introduce a WCW announcing crew on July 2nd in Tacoma, the Joey Styles deal had fallen apart over money, and Hudson was given a call to come to Connecticut for a week of training to be the lead voice of WCW. Hudson got there, but surprised the WWF by telling them, "Hey, I've already gone back to work full time and I can't take the job, but I'm willing to help you out since you guys are in a jam," and agreed to take the spot for a few weeks to just get the angle going. Hudson's partner was supposed to be Jerry Lawler. Lawler had been called by WWF officials several days before Hudson was called to ask if he could start working in Tacoma, which he agreed to do, which was to be a secret arrival in an angle booked by the creative team. But when the word got out, Lawler denied having ever talked with anyone or that he would come back because the WWF, like with Diamond Dallas Page, wanted it to be a surprise. Nobody from the WWF denied the story or would confirm it. And according to Lawler, the deal was finalized on June 28th. According to Lawler, he was supposed to be introduced with Hudson by Shane on Raw as the new WCW announcing team, and his wife, Stacey Carter, would accompany him to ringside. Lawler was told the next day that Vince McMahon wanted to make it clear they had no role for Stacey Carter other than appearing on Raw or SmackDown with Lawler at both shows in Tacoma, which Lawler agreed to. This would have resulted in both missing their scheduled bookings in Memphis on July 3rd. By the 30th, Lawler was called again and told that he wouldn't be getting a contract. He would be getting a contract, but she wouldn't. And at that point, Lawler backed out of the deal. So a lot to unpack here. It's a mess with Scott Hudson and apparently Jerry Lawler. Do you remember there being plans that perhaps Lawler would have been a WCW commentator, but it all fell apart because of Stacey again?
Yeah, I remember that situation. Jerry just trying to be loyal to his wife.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why he bolted. And that's why he quit abruptly and left. So, but there was never any talk that I can recall. I think Jerry probably thought in the old school way that, well, if we get her to TV and she's there and she gets a little pop, and
they'll use her.
They'll use her. But Vince, he still had those issues that, that she was hard to work with in his view. That's what he was told by the producers and the writers and creative people. I never had one problem with her. None. I don't know that she was a big issue at all with anybody in her peers, the other ladies. But, she had enough product knowledge to know that when something was good or maybe something could be made better. And in the way of the world in pro wrestling, Conrad, nobody wanted to get that critique from a female. So she didn't do herself any favors, even though she didn't really do anything wrong. But that was the situation. But we thought, bringing Lawler back in that role, he was great at it. He and I had a hell of a run for many, many years, and that he would be a great addition to that brand. But when he found out that Vince was set on not doing anything with Stacey, then Jerry, retreated. And so then there we left again with what we got. So we weren't prepared for all these things. We weren't prepared for all these injuries. We weren't prepared for all these, I want to work full-time. I work part-time. Oh yeah, I'll come do it. Well, but Scott would have been a good addition because he's a company man and he's intelligent and reliable. But was he going to be the long-term answer? I don't know that question. I don't know the answer rather. But that's kind of where I saw that deal. But Lawler could have made Scott better, no doubt. Because Lawler still would have been the star of the show, just like he was when he worked with me. I always knew I was the point guard and my job was to get him the ball. That's what I tried to do. So that's where we were on that deal. It was just a cluster, to be honest about it.
It's fascinating to think about what if. We recently did an episode with Eric Bischoff over on 83 Weeks talking about what his plans would have been had he gotten control of WCW towards the end of the first quarter of 2001. And he talked about moving the show to Las Vegas and setting up a residency there. And he also talked about the commentary team. And he had conversations with Joey Styles. He had conversations with Tony Schiavone and, of course, Jerry Lawler. And Bischoff revealed that his plans, had he actually acquired WCW, would have been to keep 2 shows going, a Nitro and a Thunder, and have Joey Styles as the lead voice on one, probably working with Cyrus, who we know these days as Don Callis, or as Tony Schiavone says, Don Calais. I don't know why he says that. And then, of course, the other show would be Tony Schiavone and Jerry Lawler. And I thought that was interesting that both of those guys are your old tag team partner, and now that they might be getting together, how do you think that could have worked?
Good.
Tony and Lawler.
Oh, it'd been great. Tony came back when he came back to work for AEW after Tony Khan had recruited him and brought him down to Jacksonville for a meeting and lunch and all those good things, recruiting things. Tony was very much ready to come back to wrestling. And that was the first time he had that attitude about it in quite some time. He had kind of walked away from it with not a great taste in his mouth. So I think they would have done terrific. You know, Tony's just like he is now. He's solid as a rock. And like I said, I use this word a lot, man, reliable. Mm-hmm. Anybody listen, reliability is a hell of a thing in our world right now. You know, when you got people that don't want to work, but they are willing to take all the benefits of unemployment or whatever the case may be, you know, I know down in Jacksonville, they're offering truck drivers up to $5,000 sign-on bonuses. And it's because they can't find anybody to work. People can get by, and that's what they do. They get by. They found their little comfort zone through outside monies that they haven't earned. So anyway, I think Jerry and Tony would have been phenomenal, or any combination there. Joey Styles, excellent commentator. You know, Joey was really stuck on what Joey was a devotee of the ECW style, the rough and rugged, blood and guts, hardcore. We are hardcore. We're ECW, all that shit. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. He was loyal. So Eric had some pretty good ideas there. Those guys could have done a real good job for anybody's television show in any combination that they chose to be placed in. So it's good. I thought I didn't realize that content on 83 Weeks, Conrad, to be honest with you, but it's good. It's not bad stuff. Not bad stuff at all.
Well, I'm curious from your perspective, when we talk about what did happen, we just sort of laid the groundwork that on the heels of that Buff Bagwell Booker T match, Vince McMahon changes everything.
Yeah.
But at this point, man, you were so heavily invested. You had been meeting with talent. I mean, you set up shop there in Atlanta for a while, just trying to get your arms around it, as we like to say. Mm-hmm. Now he's like, nope, moving on. How frustrating was this that Vince was seemingly throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
Well, I was very frustrated. But you know, I learned this as a kid. You know, there was one boss in my household.
Yeah.
The old man. And I learned, I was raised by a very strong, opinionated alpha male. So I kind of got indoctrinated to that style, that management style, if you want to say, at an early age. There was nothing, I figured out somewhere along the way in wrestling, probably extended my career, that don't get too wrapped up on things you can't control. It's just senseless. And so you just have to cut ties with it all. But I set up shop at a Ritz-Carlton hotel, actually, in Atlanta, down in Buckhead. And Jan was with me. I remember that very vividly. I remember taking, my God, Mr. Barnett to dinner. We had a great dinner. It's like going out with two ladies, in all due respect to Jimsy. And of course, he was giving me advice on this guy and that guy. And, you know, Barnett was a big proponent of the newsletters and things of that nature. So he had opinions on everybody. So we went to dinner for the sake of having a good meal and having some fellowship, so to speak, not to talk a lot about wrestling. But my meetings there were to find out, do you want to work?
Right.
And, you know, there are talents there that, you know, Vince didn't have a high, you know, it's like saying Dave Finley, well, he'll be a good agent or coach or producer, whatever the hell you want to call him today. And I'm thinking, well, he would be good at all those areas, but he's also got plenty of fuel left in the tank to be a hell of a wrestler. And he's a great worker. It can make anybody he was with better. And we needed a lot of that element. but you know, it's just you get the rivalry thing about, you know, this if one or two guys if they see that Vince is not overwhelmed with that idea, then you know where they're going. They're going to go right there to what they perceive Vince is thinking, so they don't run again cross the boss. So I stayed in Atlanta for, gosh, we were there, you know, maybe, I don't think we were there a week, but we were probably there 4 or 5 days, and meeting with everybody, had a schedule, and you know, to find out who wanted to work and what you wanted to do, and you know, are you healthy enough to wrestle or whatever the case may be. So that's where I Laurinaitis, I hooked up with Laurinaitis and hired him to be my assistant, and then we worked through the roster and did the best we could with it under the guideline, under the game plan that was originally set up. But then after that Seattle thing, where was it? Seattle or Tacoma?
Tacoma.
Okay. After that, all bets were off. All that work was for naught. So we still hired some guys, and the ones that we hired that we had great confidence in, like Booker T, panned out and became a Hall of Famer and a millionaire. So that's how that went down. But it was very frustrating for me because I still had to do the payroll. I was still down there doing payroll early in the morning, so the guys that we already hired were getting paid. I had to do the house show bookings. And again, the roster changed daily because of either injuries or unavailabilities. So it was hard. It was probably the toughest time in my career, stress-wise and work-wise, for me personally. But I couldn't do anything about it but do my job and try to make that proverbial chicken salad out of chicken shit.
Well, you're going to try to make chicken salad out of ECW. I'm curious, how does this become a thing? Is Heyman pushing for, hey, what if we added ECW to this WWF WCW war? Because it does feel like there's a pivot, and I don't know if that match would have went well, talking about the Booker T and Buff Bagwell match. If that thing would have gone swimmingly, I don't know that we would have seen ECW be introduced into this invasion angle. When do you remember that becoming the new thing, or was that always the plan?
I think that the inevitability of utilizing talents from ECW was just prominent. I thought it was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Because again, here's the thing, we talked about this. Because of a variety of issues, Conrad, we didn't have accessibility to a lot of people. And the ECW guys that we brought in originally were all really good workers. They were hungry. A lot of them had dreamed their whole life of being in WWE. I guarantee the Dudleys had. They grew up in that area, so they obviously, were fans of the brand. They not have been fans of the philosophies at some times, but they knew it was stable work. They knew they were getting paid on time. They may sound like not a big deal to some people, getting paid on time. Well, it is a big deal. And so by coming to WWE, they knew that they were going to get paid like clockwork, and it was not going to be a, where's my check type deal. You've heard all those stories. Heyman's he left the checks at home, or
right,
whatever. So, but I thought it was a no-brainer because it added a quality depth that we didn't have because of all these defections for injury or movies or whatever the case may be.
Well, the Atlanta Raw is where ECW morphs into this angle with WCW. Stephanie McMahon is going to be revealed as the new owner of ECW. And again, as silly as that sounds, context is king. Shane, quote unquote, owns WCW. So all fun storylines, still getting the McMahons involved. And don't forget, we're not too far removed from a WrestleMania where we had a McMahon in every corner. But the dynamic is certainly changing here. You've been through this type of thing before with the whole Bill Watts and Crockett stuff. Did you learn any lessons back in the 80s from that you were trying to convey to Vince, like, hey, now we need to be careful because I've been through this before type of deal?
Well, internally, I thought that, but, try to tell Vince, remember, I've been through this. He may have been through it to some degree as well. It got too complicated, man. So we overthought it. quite frankly. I thought we overthought it because, I'm not going to turn down hiring a Taz or a Dudley or RVD. All those are quality guys and Hall of Fame level guys, main event level guys. And because of situations out of our control, certainly out of my control, we needed talent.
Right.
They could go out there and carry a match. It could fill a main event slot. So to me, that was a no-brainer. The writers knew Vince liked to write his family in, and that's his prerogative. I'm not saying it was wrong to start with, but it's just what it was. And they became pretty good television characters, quite frankly. And so anyway, it's just it was a real challenging time, Conrad, all the way around. I think be honest with you, that they say that Bell's palsy is caused by they think either a virus or stress. I would vote for stress, and I think that I was probably under more stress than I'd ever been in my life in any situation, and I think it had an adverse effect. I'm not saying I'm blaming the invasion angle on my Bell's palsy. I'm just saying that the stress resulting from how this whole matter was handled, I think, had an adverse effect on my health.
Well, let's talk briefly about the quote unquote heat, brother. It makes the Observer that a lot of the WWF guys are resenting the WCW guys because they've been on the payroll since the end of March. And here we are now in July, and they're just now starting on the road. And of course, the WWF guys, man, they're burning the candle at both ends. They're on a real grind. And supposedly, quote unquote, there is a feeling that some of the WCW guys walk around the locker room really cocky. The biggest heat was on Booker, Stacy Keibler, Bagwell, Palumbo, and O'Hare. Jim, you're running talent relations. Are you hearing from WWF folks that?
Yeah, and I had the same answer to all of them. Are you getting paid? Yes. Did you come here to work? Yes. Are you worried about the competition, that somebody may come in and outperform you and take your spot? Yes. They didn't want to say yes to that one because that would be less macho, less alpha male-ish or alpha female-ish, whatever it may be. So, yeah, I had plenty of conversations about that. And the other side of that was, look, if working here now under these circumstances is unattainable to you, then let's get you someplace where you can be happy. In other words, I'll release your ass. I just got to go through the old man. He's not going to want you here if you don't want to be here. So that's kind of why I looked at it, Conrad. You're getting paid your fair wage and you're being used a lot. You're on television a lot. You got a chance to get over. You don't have the Austin Rock competition at that moment. You got chances to get some spotlight shined on you. So, but I didn't have a lot of sympathy for that. Well, they've been getting paid since March. What the fuck do you care?
Exactly.
What do you care when they're getting paid? So I was a little hard ass in that area because, a lot of them will tell you when you hire them, oh, this is my dream job. I've never wanted anything more in my professional life than to work in WWE. Well, great. Well, here you are. Here's your jersey. Now go play. And that's kind of how I looked at the situation. That other stuff was just professional jealousy and insecurity.
I do want to talk about something you and I have, I believe, discussed here on the show before, but I know if we don't address it, then people are going to say, hey, why didn't Buff Bagwell is let go before the Raw in Atlanta? And there's been talk about his fight with Shane Helms at developmental or practice, if you will. There's been discussions of him showing up late. There's also been discussions about his mother, Judy, calling to complain. It's unfortunate that things wound up the way it did because I feel like he still had a ton of potential, and essentially his run on national television is done after this. And I know he's been pretty vocal in later years about how, he held you responsible and had some animosity towards you for the way all of this came to an end. Mm-hmm. But I think for you, this is water under the bridge these days, and we both hope he's doing well these days. But chat me up. What do you remember about the Buff Bagwell situation?
Well, Buff he thought he had a higher opinion of his work than Vince did.
Right.
And, you know, I've become the bad guy because I'm the middleman. I'm the guy that delivers the bad news or the good news at times. But I don't hold any animosity to this day on Mark Bagwell whatsoever. I saw where he had a car wreck and it was involving, I think, drinking, maybe something here the last few months. He just wasn't a good fit, Conrad. And he, you know, that partying lifestyle, you know, we're trying to distance ourselves a little bit from that if we could. But, you know, it just, and again, you know, Vince just didn't see the money in Mark that Mark saw it himself. So I can only deal with the hand that's dealt me. When I'm told this kid's not going to get it, I want you to let him go. So when we were in Atlanta, we went to a little room there. I remember vividly. I didn't enjoy doing it. How in the hell could you be a human being and enjoy telling somebody that they're done? I'm not that person. I felt for him and I felt bad for him, and it didn't have a lot to do with Judy, but that's good dirt. Goddamn, that's really good dirt, you know. So Judy had little to do with that. Mark's own personal habits and the way he conducted himself was what let the air out of his sails. And but if he had a better attitude at that young age and at that point in time, you know, we're talking over 20 years ago. You know, he'd have had a shot to get playing time. But it just, he wasn't given that opportunity. It seemed like partying was a little bit more important to him than being a professional.
This is something else that we've got to address, and it concerns another member of our ad-free show's family. Here's the Observer write-up. To show how wild the ideas became, there was serious talk of bringing in Eric Bischoff. Backstage at Raw in Atlanta, there was talk that Bischoff would debut the next night on SmackDown, though those in the inner circle claimed the Bischoff deal had fallen through several days earlier. The claim was that once again, the entire WWF versus WCW issue was booked more for ego and to prove the new group was second rate, even though they owned it. They only wanted Bischoff for 2 weeks, just long enough to save a pay-per-view they were afraid was heading for a fall. Bischoff would come in, shoot an angle, do a match with Vince, which was thought would draw a big buy rate. Vince, of course, would go over, and Bischoff would never be heard from again. One WWF source claimed Bischoff turned down the idea because it was short term, although Bischoff denied any approach was made, saying he couldn't believe they'd make the approach because they would have known he would have turned it down. Now, in more recent years, Eric has said that he did get a call from you, but it wasn't necessarily a fully formed pitch or idea, more of a taking the temperature, if you will. But Bischoff's going to not wind up being part of this angle. And I got to agree, if he's here as the mouthpiece for some WCW guys, and we did get that Vince McMahon versus Eric Bischoff match, maybe even here at the Invasion pay-per-view, that would have been pretty cool. We know he doesn't come in for a whole year, though. He's going to be in the next year in 2002. Chat me up. Do you remember making this call to Eric and it not going very well?
Well, we didn't have a good plan, and Eric's a smart guy, and he could see it was a short-term deal. He was going to be used. You're going to be brought in, you're going to be built up, you're going to be beat, and then you're going to be humiliated and part of that process to some degree, and you're going to be sent on your merry way. If I were Eric, I wouldn't have done it either. Just didn't. It was short term, and so yeah, we chatted, but you know, we had I guess you would say, kind of an icy relationship, which I will take responsibility for. You know, if Bruce were here, he'd laugh about, well, you're just still pissed off about your refrigerator and your washer and dryer being held hostage. But there were some old open wounds, to be a man's man and answer your question and to be honest about it. But I think he made the right decision. Vince was thinking short term, as if Eric really needed the money and had to have a job immediately and get relevant again on television in his world. And Eric didn't have that same train of thought. So I think Eric made the right decision, quite frankly, Conrad, but it was just to just to test the waters. It was a good idea. you know, you got to be a Cowboy Bill Watts booking genius to figure out that, you know, McMahon and Eric had an angle that had been unofficially being nurtured for quite some time. So Eric made the right decision, no doubt. But I do remember the phone call, and I think that kind of led to he and I getting back on a same page. You know, my ego got in my way of being taken off the air in WCW when I didn't think it was necessary. I took it personally, and I've grown to kind of outgrew that, Conrad, in later years. So and Eric and I are friends now. So at the end of the day, that's kind of how I look at everything. How did it play out? Well, it played out that Eric finally got a gig there in a higher level role. He stayed longer. He made more money, and he was a talent, and I was the head of talent. So I needed to get along with him, and he needed to get along with me to some degree, if nothing else, just professionally. But since that time, we've become good buddies and have a few cocktails here, there, and yon, and I'm kind of glad we had that experience. But he made the right call. He should not have taken that gig. I didn't say that to him, obviously. I just wanted to know if he was remotely interested in kind of what was going on. And he could figure out the fact that, well, I'm going to work with Vince. He's going to go over. I don't know if that's a big deal or not, quite frankly. But I do think that he made the right call for him, and it worked out fine for him and WWE. He had a good run there.
One of the other things we should talk about is you signing new ECW talent, not just WCW guys, but now you're going to put Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer on paper right before the ECW invasion. What do you remember about contract negotiations with these guys?
Tommy was easier than Rob. They had different mindsets, and but both of them weren't difficult to negotiate with. So, you know, it was good. Again, you're getting two veteran, durable, main event level guys that could contribute to the team's success. And they're both excellent hands. And not to denigrate Tommy, but Rob was Rob was the hell of a star, and could have been even bigger if the hand had been a little different. But I was really happy we were able to sign those guys and get them on paper and get them on the team.
Do you think pushing some of the young, shall we say, quote unquote, green WCW talent like Jindrak and O'Hare on TV instead of putting them in developmental hurt them long term?
Absolutely. They weren't ready. They had great bodies. They looked good on an 8x10.
Yeah, great.
Big, tall, 6'5", 6'6", 6'4", whatever the hell it was. They were big kids, but they didn't have the enough experience, fundamental soundness, you know. And so you often wonder, well, if this guy's fundamentally, he's not as pure as you want him to be, he may hurt himself or hurt somebody else. He needs fundamental work, reps. And of course, they came out of WCW and they thought they were big stars, and they didn't draw money there. They weren't a big part of the money drawing apparatus there in WCW. That was the NWO. Who else besides the NWO drew big money? Goldberg, he was, but he was involved in the NWO stuff,
right?
And so I don't know, man. They need to go to developmental. They need to spend 6 months, maybe a year, in Louisville, learning to put the ring up, because everybody did. You learned, everybody was on the ring crew. Everybody. Brock Lesnar was the foreman of the ring crew. Drove the ring truck. And somebody said, well, that may just be JR, playing. He said, role playing Cowboy Bill, and these guys they're being abused or they're being disrespected. No, they're learning the business. They learn that everything that we do is important. Putting the ring up is important. The referees are important. Doing a little media here, there, and yon is important. The meet and greets they did, everything's important. So they needed that experience. Did Jindrak and O'Hare, and they weren't ready. Their bodies are ready. They look good, Connie, but they weren't socially ready. And it just, I wish we'd have been able to send them down there, but it was a lot of the writers loved them because of their size, their look, because they knew Vince was going to love their size and their look. You come back to that same topic all the time, like we're chasing our damn tails. Round and round we go. And so anyhow, that's yeah, they could have used some training big time.
ECW's name and likeness is going to get caught up in a legal battle because, as you may recall, they were in active bankruptcy. So eventually the WWF's legal department handles some of that, and ta-da, now they own it. Yeah. We should also mention that Terry Bambam Gordy unfortunately passes away on July 16th, which coincidentally, you and I are recording on July 16th. So as you and I are speaking today, Jim, it's the 20-year anniversary of Mr. Gordy's passing. Yeah. What do you think his legacy will be in the business?
Unfortunately, that apparent drug-induced death, because that's a sensational way of looking at it, especially in today's world of internet feedback and fans that have a lot of knowledge. At least they think they do more often than not. But let's not forget, I've been told by guys that were that I truly respected, Watts, Ernie Ladd, Terry Funk, a lot of guys that I hold in high regard, that said he was the greatest teenage wrestler they ever saw in their life. He was really, really good, Conrad, at 16.
Right.
A big kid, big athletic kid. But his instincts for wrestling and his psychology and his timing was just absolutely amazing. And I think him hooking up with Michael Hayes early was a good thing for Bam Bam, because Hayes was a student of the game and was way ahead of the curve of most guys I knew, as far as being a smart guy and a good strategist. And they were both hungry. But Terry Gordy should be remembered as one of the greatest big men workers, 300-pound workers ever. Unfortunately, much like Chris Benoit, he's not going to be remembered for his wrestling. He's going to be remembered for how he died, and that's not cool.
Let's talk about the go home angle for this pay-per-view. It's a pretty classic moment. You've got the WWF, WCW, and ECW guys all there at the same time. The glass breaks and Stone Cold comes out to one of the biggest pops ever. It's a pretty special moment. It feels like a big moment. And fans at home agree, and they're voting with their wallet. Again, WrestleMania set every record there was for pay-per-view, for gates, et cetera, et cetera. But in the subsequent months, it's down, down, down. They don't want to see Steve Austin as a heel, but now this is so exciting. I mean, what we've seen on the cover of these after magazines for decades, the hypotheticals, the dream matches, the what ifs, it's going to happen. And the result is a ton of folks, like 770,000 people buy this pay-per-view. Did you know on that go home edition, hey, shit, man, maybe we'll pull the nose up on this thing. This is hot shit.
Well, I remember that the crowd bought it, so the studio audience, so to speak, was firmly sold. And so you think, well, there's an interest here,
right?
These fans here are in. That's all that is, Conrad, is, and why a lot of promotions always, their lifeblood was the live events. And I just felt like, well, God, this live event here, these are people on fire. There's a renewed interest because there's new faces that create new matches. And as you mentioned earlier, one of my old cliches, or whatever you want to call them, fans like new.
Yeah.
And so we were giving them new. And I think that we underestimated how much collectively that these guys are over. And of course, we saw how much they were over with 700,000 plus buys. It's a big money maker.
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about something that didn't happen, but almost happened or could have happened. It was in the Observer, quote, an angle was proposed for Raw this week where Paul Heyman would beat up Jim Ross, but Ross nixed it. Do you remember that?
Very vaguely. Paul always had ideas.
Sure.
But putting two cows on ice doesn't mean it's going to be ballet. So I saw, and here's what happens there. Eventually I was involved in a lot of matches, but none that I wanted to be in because I didn't feel like I was very good at that particular job. But the minute by minutes ratings kill me because it's like watching NASCAR. I don't think they were watching to see me win or have this technical expertise. They're watching for a train wreck, car wreck, whatever. And so if Heyman and I shoot this angle, how do we blow it off?
Right.
Well, it seemed to me, if I recall correctly, nobody had the idea of how we're going to blow it off. So how do we pay it off? Or are we just going to go half-ass this thing? And I just wasn't really interested in, I worked with a lot of guys that could work, but including Eric, we were talking about, because I remember him hitting me in the head with a cinder block. So it's not that I wouldn't do the business. It's just that where do you go with it?
That's so odd. Can you imagine how silly our conversations sound out of context? A few minutes ago, you're talking about Eric. And of course, we're friends now. Fast forward 5 minutes. Now, I remember him hitting me in the
That's part of the angle. I got juice.
It's still hilarious, though.
Yeah.
In the real world, nobody just knows a guy who broke a cinder block over their head.
I know. Well, it's not the real world, as you well know. So it's the sophomore drama class or something. But I didn't know what are we doing here? We're gonna help get Paul over,
right?
Because I'm not looking to wrestle. So I don't remember a lot of details of that conversation other than, Vince, I don't know why we're doing this.
Right.
I'll do whatever you want. And I would have done it, Conrad. It's not that JR nixed it. Like I had the veto power over creative. Well, that we all know that's not true.
Right.
So I don't know where Dave got that information. I nixed it. So it's a dead deal. If Vince had wanted that match or that encounter, that angle to be shot, we would have shot it. But he was like me in the sense that, where do we go with this thing? Where does it lead to? And I don't know what that answer is, to be honest with you. So, but it wouldn't have been it wasn't I use this a lot in a positive way, but that would not have been a Funk Briscoe classic. Heyman and JR. Good God Almighty! Can you even imagine that? It would have been hideous. So anyway, we didn't do it, but if Vince had wanted to do it, Connie,
we would have done it.
We would have done it.
So we're finally at the show. It's Invasion from the Gund Arena in Cleveland. The readers of the Wrestling Observer gave it 53.6% thumbs up, 21.3% thumbs down, and 25.1% thumbs in the middle. The show drew 17,019 fans. The gate is an incredible $848,060 plus another 146,000 in merch. So it's a big day for the company, but critically it's a mixed bag. Do you remember feeling like when you went into this show that this was not your typical quote unquote B pay-per-view show? I call it a B show because it's not WrestleMania. It's not SummerSlam. It's not Royal Rumble. It's not one of your tentpole events, in a prior world. Well, I guess just a couple years prior to this would have been an in your house. So it would have been a 2-hour show at a smaller price. And it probably just would have built towards SummerSlam, but now it feels like we've created a mega event just based on the story and angle. And there's a lot of buzz, way more than there would normally be for a July pay-per-view.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the show got the theme of the show. The reason it was booked was a winner, but we had too many gimmick matches. And this WCW, who's going to, we're going to talk about here in a second. I forgot about Earl Hebner wrestling Nick Patrick,
right,
in a battle of referees. How can that be good? And I love both those guys. They're both really good referees, not so great as wrestlers,
right?
And I don't know. I think that hurt us a little bit there. I think we went a little bit too gimmicky on it, and not to anybody's anybody's betterment, quite frankly.
Well, here we go. Match number 1. It's Edge and Christian taking on Landstorm and Mike Awesome, and the WWF gets the win. 10 minutes and 10 seconds. Meltzer would say the match had its ups and downs. There was some sloppiness early, but built well, and good near falls at the end. An awesome bump, or Awesome took a bump from a missed drop kick by Edge. Then Storm nearly killed himself, taking a bump over the top. Then Christian slipped off Edge's back. His foot caught the ropes trying to do a big dive, and he could have also been hurt, but everyone seemed okay. Storm threw Christian into the post to start the heat on Christian. Christian reversed Awesome's power bomb off the top. Some good near falls. Awesome goes for the Awesome bomb on Edge, but Christian spears him, and Edge falls on top for the pin. 2.5 stars. So a lot of Canadians here, and Mike Awesome and the WWF is on the scoreboard 1-0. What'd you think of this one?
Not bad opener. You know, I've always been, I have great respect for Lance Storm, still do. I think he's one of the best teachers that I've ever seen. His students are fundamentally sound and respect the business. But I was a big mark for Edge and Christian, you know, not just because I signed them both, but I like them. I like their passion and their willingness to be as great as they possibly can. So, but it was okay. You know, it was a cold match. The only thing going for it was the brand rivalry, because there's no issue between Edge and Christian and Lance Storm and Mike Awesome. So we got about as much out of it as we could, thanks to all 4 guys' efforts. It was okay.
Let's talk about Edge and Christian for a moment, because on TV prior to this, they had been mega heels, but now because of this invasion dynamic, they're kind of the baby faces. This is a new look for everybody, right?
Yeah, it was. Again, it was hard to connect the dots, because last week these guys were being booed and they were villains. These guys meaning Edge and Christian. And now, because of the colored jersey they're wearing, so to speak, they're the good guys. And that was a disconnect for some people. But the match was fine for what it was, a cold match. Started the show. They were lucky they started the show because the crowd was so ready to see something. And so I thought those guys did a solid job. Was it the greatest opener? No, because there was no backstory of significance. But, you know, we got 2.5 stars by Meltzer's measurements. I consider that a success.
Well, how about this next match here? Earl Hebner is going to pin Nick Patrick in 2 minutes and 50 seconds in the battle of the referees. Meltzer would write, now that they did the match, I have even less clue as to why. Mick Foley was the referee. All the WCW refs attacked Hebner, so Foley kicked him out. Hebner won the match with the spear. Patrick wrestled for a few years in the 80s and was pretty entertaining. Hebner, who is older and has had some serious health problems, was really blown up. Short enough that it wasn't that bad, but in hindsight, there was no reason for it. But boy, this really does lend some credence to the idea that they wanted to do Vince versus Eric. I mean, hell, if they're doing Hebner versus Patrick,
yeah,
this was a bad idea. Who can we pin this on?
Vince.
There you go.
I mean, somebody may have suggested maybe that's a spinoff of no Heyman and JR. So we'll do the referees. I don't know, but this taking that theme to serious levels of deep water. And, but that was ill-booked, ill-fated. Again, hanging everything on the brand rivalry, because obviously Earl was not a wrestler, and Nick wrestled years and years ago until he got hurt. You know, Nick never achieved the fame of his dad, Joe Hamilton, who was one of the assassins, who I've always thought the original assassins of Joe Hamilton and Tom Ernesto was one of the greatest tag teams I ever saw. They affected me more as a kid in their program in the Oklahoma Territory with Grizzly Smith and Luke Brown than anything at that time in my life. So I always have had a special place. I got to work with Joe in WCW a lot. I always enjoyed it, but he was a great hand in the ring. but Nick was on his way to becoming a good, solid wrestler, but he got a real bad knee injury or something like that. But and that was before arthroscopic surgeries and all these things that was refined. But the match didn't need to be booked. They could have had an altercation in the back. They could have had, both of them thought they were booked for this match, and then they got into a little scuffle. Would have been fine. But to have an official match just didn't make any sense.
So up next, we've got the APA wrestling Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo in a non-title battle of the WWF tag champs against the WCW tag champs. Meltzer would write, Palumbo and O'Haire were aggressive, but didn't get much heat, all brawling and pretty stiff. Bradshaw pinned Palumbo with the clothesline for what in another era would have been such an important deal. This was really nothing. 1 star. Let's recap. Edge and Christian beat Landstorm and Mike Awesome, so it's 1-0 WWF. Then Earl Hebner beat Nick Patrick, so it's 2-0 WWF. And now the APA has beat the WCW tag champs. It is 3-0 WWF. Not exactly an invasion at this point, huh?
No, that's how you're looking at it. It was booked to be that way. It was booked to show the WWE had the dominance over any brand, including WCW. Here's the thing. Could Nick Patrick have beaten Earl Hebner to justify what your point you're making about, well, it's a burial or whatever it's going to be? I get it. I'm with you, man. But that's not the way Vince had it envisioned. And so it's just, that wouldn't be the last time that WCW would lose a match in this pay-per-view either. By the way, they didn't have a great night.
So let's talk about Billy Kidman. He's going to be the first guy to get a pin for WCW, and it's happening in the very next match. They go 7 minutes and 12 seconds before he pins X-Pac. It's the WCW Cruiserweight champ versus the WWF Light Heavyweight champ. And even though neither title is at stake, WCW's on the board now, so it's 3-1. Meltzer would write, X-Pac was still booed even on the WWF team, and he played a heel from the start. The word on Kidman was always that he desperately needed a new ring outfit. Now that he's got one, he still does, as those tight biker shorts were from 4 years ago. X-Pac did a Silver King plancha. Kidman kicked out of the X Factor and got the pin with a shooting star press. Nothing wrong with the match, but nothing compared with Kidman's matches on WCW pay-per-view events. 2 stars. Why don't you think this match was better? I mean, these are both 2 very capable performers. Did Waltman have an off night? Did Kidman have an off night? Did Kidman was he not comfortable in a WWF ring yet? What do you think this was?
I think it was cold booking.
Yeah. The
titles weren't at stake. They hadn't had a program to lead into this match. So it was cold. And somewhere along the way, I'm going to convince you this is the way that this thing is booked. There are a lot of cold matches, man.
Yeah.
And but there's nothing wrong with this match. It just was a cold match, and it didn't bring the emotion or the build up to it to set the table for it. So, but both those guys were hellacious workers. I used to call Billy Kidman the world's greatest overachiever.
Of course.
Because he was married to Tori Wilson. And so he was always one of my heroes in that regard. So I think he's still working for WWE.
Tell me what you make of Meltzer's criticism of Kidman's gear. How important? I mean, listen, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I am wondering, good old JR's book, how important is what you wear to the ring?
Well, you got to look professional and look neat and clean, but is it a deal breaker or maker? It's not going to make you a star, but it can make you look less than a star if you come out there slouch your ass and spend any money on your gear, and it is what it is. I think Dave may have in my opinion, he made too much of it.
Yeah.
That's just me. The biker shorts are so, I just didn't think in those terms, and maybe that's just, he's smarter than me and you and everybody else. He is smarter than most people, and as far as wrestling is concerned. But it was just another example of a cold match that the fans were not emotionally invested in. But you still got 2 stars out of it, which is probably that's probably a little bit of a surprise. but those guys are both hellacious workers. And if they'd had a bigger canvas to do their art on, and they had a build up, and we were looking forward to this match. I can't wait to see this. Man, that match they had on TV 2 weeks ago was amazing. And now they're going to settle it, blah, 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 something. But it's nothing. So I think that's the coldness and the cold match concept is plaguing this show throughout.
Let's talk about the next match. It's Raven and William Regal. They go 6.5 minutes. Raven gets the win. And Meltzer would say this match didn't get over at all. The crowd was dead except for boring chants. And in the ring, it was just a major styles clash. Raven did a leg sweep into the barricades. Regal is an old school wrestler, and Raven is a creative garbage wrestler. Finish saw Taz interfere and suplex Regal, allowing Raven to get the pin with a DDT. Quarter star. So now we've got a little bit of change in momentum after starting 3-0 on the WWF side. Now we've got back-to-back wins for the WCW, ECW contingent, the alliance, if you will. I know we both like both of these guys, Raven and William Regal.
Yep.
Styles Clash is probably the right way to describe this one, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And then you add that element of Taz into the equation. So you got some really talented guys involved. But again, you get the same scenario we talked about earlier. The match was cold, it meant nothing. The people didn't care. And so when you get that hand dealt you as a talent, it's very hard to, you're swimming upstream, shall we say. But that match was if styles make fights, this is not a good fight.
Next up, we've got a 6-man. It's going to be Chris Kanyon teaming with Sean Stasiak and Hugh Morris to win over Big Show, Billy Gunn, and Albert. They don't get very much time, 4 minutes and 23 seconds. But once again, it's a win for the alliance. So it's going to be 3-3 here. But again, 4 minutes and 23 seconds, not a ton of time. Meltzer right. Fans didn't seem to care about Gunn, who did that heel turn that nobody was and didn't register. They didn't know how to take Albert since he's on TV as a heel. And the WWF did a triple press slam spot to open the match. Kanyon did a traditional Russian leg sweep, followed by a face first version, a couple of near falls and saves before Stasiak did a reverse DDT to Gunn, and Morris pinned him, a quarter star. So this just feels like, hey, we don't really have anything for these guys. Let's just throw them all in here and get them a payday. Is that about it?
Yeah, pretty much. I probably wouldn't have put Show on the losing side because he was the money guy, I think, of that whole contingent at that point in their careers. I also think that it was it showcased a little bit of Kanyon's talents. I know Dark Side of the Ring is going to do a special show on Chris Kanyon coming up this fall. And he was a very unique character, complex character, left us too soon, but he was a very underrated guy. But you know, it's all leading to the crucial tiebreaker win. Who's going to win the night type thing. But we found out that just when you get to the arena and you start having matches, it's all about the matches. It's not about our team versus your team, unless you have had issues leading into their match. And most of these matches didn't have that at all. So, but it was okay. I mean, you know, it was our quarter star, you know, I don't, that's all subjective anyway. I don't know what that means. That's like saying, who's in your Mount Rushmore? Well, what's your criteria? What's your criteria, Conrad? Is it money? Is it a ring attire?
Right.
You know, what is it? Is it drawing money? Is it tenure? Titles held? I don't know what the criteria is for determining certain things like that. But it's hard to broadcast this show because we're trying to hang our hat on something people just weren't buying. And that was this team thing. The team should have had more time to gather momentum and create some issues so that this pay-per-view would have been the blow off. People were expecting something special, and that's why 700-something thousand people bought it. And I don't know that we delivered something special, which I think is probably one of the biggest reasons that Vince didn't do the second one.
It's interesting to think about all these different personalities you've gotten here. We know Hugh Morris is going to go on to be a developmental trainer who's going to run into a little bit of controversy. Unfortunately, Chris Canyon's no longer with us. He sadly took his own life several years ago. Albert these days is helping run things with NXT. Billy Gunn has seemingly found the fountain of youth. He's working with you guys down in AEW, as is Big Show.
Mm-hmm.
But Sean Stasiak is still in great shape, not that old, and not doing anything in wrestling these days. Why do you think that is?
Because he's working full time as a chiropractor. He's got a regular gig. And Sean was an interesting character. Sometimes I thought maybe he cared too much, but he always looks good. He always, you know, he wanted to be a lifer like his dad, Stan Stasiak, who had a cup of coffee with the WWF title at one point in time. But a good kid, well intended, well meaning, but he could rub people the wrong way inadvertently, I would say. So, but he learned to trade outside the ring, Conrad, and that's smart. That's smart. So, and I think he's a chiropractor down in Dallas. That's the last time when I've talked to him several times, and not lately, but I've talked to him on some quasi regular basis. You know, I felt bad for the kid. You know, he wanted to be a big wrestling star like his dad so badly that sometimes he would trip over his own feet. So, but he did look good, no doubt about that. And we had high hopes for him at one point in time. It just didn't materialize.
Next up, we've got Yoshihiro Tajiri pinning Taz in 5 minutes and 43 seconds. Meltzer would say Tajiri is great. Taz looks slow and rusty, but still throws a mean suplex. Tajiri carried it with his great kicks and the tarantula. Tajiri was throwing kicks when Taz blocked one and suplexed him. Tajiri blew the green mist and kicked Taz in the side of the face for the pin. Star and 3/4. Man, I don't know. What'd you think?
Well, I was a little surprised that Tajiri went over.
Me too.
I probably would have put Taz over. But you know, there was an out, you know, the mist and all that other stuff. But Meltzer's right about Tajiri being a great talent.
Oh yeah.
He was really, really good and funny and the boys loved to be around him. We talk about guys fitting into the locker room or not. He fit. And even though he had language issues, he kind of made fun of himself, but he had a great sense of humor. And some of the things he did backstage wise with Regal, I thought were priceless. And when he kicked you, you knew that something in his business was picking up, because he was just absolutely great executing what he did. And wasn't a big guy, but he wrestled like a big guy. So I'm a big fan of Tajiri's then and now. But I probably would have put Taz over. I just had higher hopes that Taz was going to be a bigger star than he was able to achieve in WWE. I just thought he was unique. He had a unique look. You know, he had a unique game plan. He was a suplex machine. I think, as a matter of fact, Conrad, he's the human suplex machine.
Yes, he is.
So I'm happy for Taz. I think Taz is, you know, Taz still enjoys being around the business, and you know, he's got a young son. He's trying to get started and help get in the game. And Hook is another one that could probably stand to go to as many wrestling classes as he can at this stage of his life. He's another one that needs to, you know, he does train. I don't know how much, because I'm not around him on a regular basis in that regard. But I would have put my money on Taz on that one and put him over. But as the finish worked out, he got protected a little bit. But the thing that killed Taz, and if you're going to get tired of hearing this shit, he was 5'9" or something there. He was under 6 feet.
Right.
And he still is, last time I saw him. So that killed him to some degree. He shouldn't have. He deserved better, but he didn't get it. And but I was a big Taz fan then. I still am, for that matter. I enjoy working with him on television when he's out there with us. But I'm like you. I'd have gone the other direction.
Up next, perhaps the match that everyone remembers most from this show, and what a match it is. Rob Van Dam and Jeff Hardy are going to go 12 minutes and 24 seconds. Rob Van Dam is going to pick up the win and win the WWF Hardcore title in the process. He gets 4 stars. Unfortunately, there's a big spot where Van Dam drop kicks a chair into Hardy's face and splits Hardy's head open pretty big. And of course, he does the split-legged moonsault, but Hardy gets the knees up and DDTs Van Dam on his head. Hardy misses the swanton, and that allows Van Dam to get the win with the frog splash, of course, with the title on his chest. And Meltzer would call it easily the show stealer and gave it 4 stars. Quite a debut, if you will, for Rob Van Dam, and arguably Jeff Hardy was the perfect opponent. This is really a bright spot on the show, and I imagine turned a lot of heads. What'd you think of this one?
Loved it. I thought those guys, thank God we had something that was stimulating. There was something at stake. They were fighting for something other than the team spirit of our brand versus your brand, Bula Bula, Ray Home Team, all that stuff. But I thought those guys killed it. They just killed it. And I was so relieved that we got something good to call. Let's say good. That's not good for me to say something like that, I guess, but it was a match that obviously the crowd was very emotionally invested within. And the crowd cared about both guys. And through the process of smart working and effort, the guys made the crowd like them, invest in them, should I say, even more. So it was money. I don't 4 stars, 4.5, 3 3/4, click here, drag this, log in, whatever the shit. But they did good, man. But they realized they're young guys. They got a chance. They got a real good spot. And look, they could see what they were following. They could hear the reaction or non-reaction. So now they're getting an audience that's ready for them. And so to their credit, to Rob and Jeff's credit, they delivered. So the 4+ stars or whatever it was, that was well deserved in my view. I don't know there's a better match all night, quite frankly.
I don't think there was. I mean, I think it's arguably one of the best matches Rob Van Dam ever had, and it's his first major one here in the WWF. And man, what a showing! 4 stars. Go out of your way to see it. If there's one match on this show, you should go back and revisit this week. That's the one. Maybe not the next one though. By the way, it's 4-4 in case you're curious. The Alliance versus the WWF. Next up though, it's Trish and Lita. They're going to be taking on Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler, and double bra and panties match. They go 5 minutes and 4 seconds with Foley as the referee. Meltzer would say it was what you'd expect, mainly women tearing clothes off of each other. All 4 were in their bras when the WCW women had their pants taken off to lose. Keibler didn't seem happy about being in her bra. Match was long enough to where they actually tried some wrestling between the clothes ripping, and that was predictably awful. Of course, Trish and Lita were trained wrestlers, but I don't think Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler did much wrestling in WCW. Was it important for you to have these ladies learn how to wrestle a match once they come over?
Yeah, that's why we had hired people like Jackie Moore and Jazz and Ivory, among others. You had to have some people there that was going to help tutor, mentor, play it forward type thing. But this is just a let me up deal.
Yeah.
It was a let me up, as Vince likes to say, a let me up match. They were providing something that I think, if I'm not mistaken, looking back at this, Conrad, that was the only female match on the card. Am I right on that one?
Yeah.
I think we are. So it was unique in that regard. And there was, look, if you do play it forward, as is often said, you'll see that all 4 of those women had distinguished careers.
Yes. In
the company, but they just had to get their game together, and it's a lot easier said than done. So anyway, I think that they did the let me up match about as good as they could. It was a little comedy, it wasn't dramatic, or wasn't car crash type thing, big bumps and things of that nature. So I think they just fulfilled their role. It wasn't booked to be a show stealer. It was booked to give you a little let me up entertainment. And I thought they did that, because you can't find 4 sexier women involved in a presentation at that time than those 4.
Now it's time for a main event. In case you are keeping score, it's 5-4 WWF. But here's our real main event now. It's the ECW/WCW Team of the Alliance, which is comprised of the Dudley Boys, Rhino, Diamond Dallas Page, and Booker T. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different guys on that side. And of course, on the other side, it's Steve Austin, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Undertaker, and Kane. Undertaker's going to be nursing a few injuries here. Obviously, Austin and Angle are playing hurt. So it feels like it'll be heavily relying on Jericho and Kane coming in. They get a ton of time too. It is a WWF main event. So it's 29 minutes and 3 seconds, but Meltzer didn't love it. He says everyone worked hard and this was good, but not the caliber of most WWF main events. Austin and Angle in particular got huge reactions when they came out. Vince, Shane, Paul Heyman, and Stephanie were all brought out to ringside, but until the finish, none played a part in the match. Austin didn't look good as far as moving early, but seemed to get it going as the match got going. He picked his spots and actually did more than I figured he would. He did a superplex off the top to Rhino early on, and the match would have been better served being a little shorter as it seemed to drag in the middle. Austin tagged in at 11 minutes and kicked the hell out of Booker. Austin even did a suplex on the floor to Booker, and Jim Ross went off on WCW and ECW here. He said that WCW was an organization that was dormant for years and that ECW created a style that was career shortening.
Any of that untrue?
Nope.
I mean, I'm a homer.
Of course. Yeah. You're supposed to be pulling for the WWF.
Exactly. And it wasn't, no, he buried these guys.
Right.
Easy, pal. You know, I represented my role with the team that I was playing on.
Sure.
So that's kind of where that was. But I'm like Meltzer. I thought, I didn't know how much Austin and Kurt would have the ability to do because of their injuries. And they both did a whole hell of a lot more than I thought they might be able to do. That's just once the adrenaline starts flowing, man, you got 17,000 fans there and you're in the main event. They're just something that if you're a main event level player, you just can't help yourself. And I thought that's what this was. I thought the whole presentation, that last match was pretty damn good.
There's an angle slam on Bubba and then an ankle lock on Booker, but Booker's going to kick Angle off and he's going to bump into referee Mike Chioda. So Mike goes down. Vince McMahon then grabs the title, throws it to Austin, but Shane gets the belt and hits Vince with it. Angle knocks Shane out of the ring and gives Booker the angle slam and has him in the ankle lock, and Booker's tapping, but of course there's no referee here. Austin then makes his miraculous comeback, throwing Chioda in the ring, but then he kicked Angle and gave him a stunner and put Booker T on top and ordered the referee to count. The show ended with Austin in the ring drinking beer with Shane, Stephanie, and Heyman, 3.5 stars. So a lot to unpack here, as I like to say, but we haven't learned our lesson, right? Like Austin's the biggest star in the business. WrestleMania 17 breaks every single record. We turn him heel in the main event and the business takes a nosedive. Yep. We pulled the nose up with this invasion angle. So we think, why not do it again? And we turn Austin heel again, even though Austin was technically a heel. Now he's waving the WWF banner. So he's a good guy and gets a thunderous pop. But at the end of the show, he turns his back on the WWF and joins the alliance. Now, I understand from a creative standpoint, you probably think we need a little more star power on that side of the ball. I get that. But man, it just feels like this was an opportunity to undo or perhaps misstep from WrestleMania. Was this something you think Austin would have pushed for?
No, he still wanted to be a heel.
Yeah.
And Vince, as I said on this show, Conrad, in meetings I had with the three of us, and then private meetings with Vince, we owe him that, JR. We owe him the opportunity to, and he said, and his instincts have been pretty good at Stone Cold. So maybe he's on to something. Maybe it'll be right place, right time, and it clicks. I just thought it was poor casting, i.e. booking. And I expressed myself to both guys, man to man, that I didn't didn't think this was going to work. It's hard in the pro wrestling business to build a viable money drawing baby face.
Yep.
And when you find that person and you have that execution of this function, you don't want to screw with it. Just make it stronger. And you do that by having stronger villains and the numbers game, and you put the babyface in jeopardy. But for God's sakes, changing back and forth or whatever when it's working is what you want to play upon that. So, but it was just two guys, Vince and Steve, that didn't want to say, well, we're not this. Maybe this will do it. Maybe this will be the trick that it takes. But what people didn't understand is that Steve was beloved so much that even though he had little rough edges and he was coarse, and the fingers and the beer and the cursing and all these things, people loved him for that attitude. They wish they had that attitude. They lived vicariously through him, and to hell with the brands and the color of your jersey. So, but you can make an argument, well, they needed more depth and they needed more star power and all that stuff. You're getting star power from a guy that really can't wrestle full time. So what are we doing? It makes sense to me. So, and they're still buying his merchandise. There's nothing else to tell you. They're still buying his merch like it's going out of style, like it's going to be obsolete, Conrad.
Yeah.
So I don't know what, it was just stubbornness, I think. If you want to cut through the bullshit, I think it was just people being stubborn and saying, well, we can make this work. Sometimes you can't make things work if the audience doesn't want it to work. And they did not want it to work as it relates to Steve being this hated villain, where I want to pay my money to come see Stone Cold get the shit kicked out of him. That never crossed the fans' mind in my estimation.
Let's take a look at where the business was. Royal Rumble 01, 625,000 buys. No Way Out 01, 590,000 buys. WrestleMania 17, 1,040,000 buys. And at the end of that show, Austin turns heel. So a month later, Backlash 2001, 375,000 buys. Judgment Day 01, 405,000 buys. King of the Ring 01, 445,000 buys. And then here we are for Invasion, 775,000 buys. Way, way up. But again, we turned Austin heel in the main event. SummerSlam, a tentpole event, did 570,000 buys. It did less than No Way Out. And the slide continues from there. Unforgiven is 350,000 buys in September. No Mercy in October is 325,000 buys. It feels like the wheels have run off here. In hindsight, it's got to be, if not the biggest blunder with Steve Austin, the second biggest. I think it's probably the biggest. It's easy to sit here now with the benefit of hindsight. I understand where he's coming from, that, hey man, I feel like I need to try something different here to keep me hot, keep me on top. But man, it drug business down when nobody could have predicted it would do that.
Well, here's the thing. Steve could see by how things are shaping out. He didn't have a lot of viable opponents being prepared for him.
Right.
And so it was almost a defensive mode for him.
He thought it was out of necessity. I don't have anybody to work with.
Exactly. So I'll change character and I'll become a bad guy. But here's the thing. That's the same roster you're looking at. Do you have, by you turning heel, you have guys to work with?
Right.
Who are you going to draw money with? When you get your roster crippled with injuries and other outside influences, it's just where you are. I would never, and I've said this many times, and I told Steve this, we kind of half-assed laugh about it. I wouldn't turn him heel for nothing in the world. You could not have made me turn him heel if I had the quote unquote pencil whatsoever. But that's what he wanted to do. And as we said, Vince wanted to, let's let him have this opportunity. And so that's kind of where we were, buddy. It's just, and we tried it and it didn't work. And it was out of respect for Steve, but it was not a great idea. And of course he admits that now. He knows. He's not still standing on that hill yelling, I'm a heel, I'm a heel.
Right.
And the way he worked, Conrad, you think he worked like a Ricky Steamboat babyface, Ricky
Of course
Morton?
not. Come on.
No, just keep doing what you're doing, and put the pressure on the old man and everybody else involved in the process to, pardon me, to get you some opponents ready. And to me, that was the issue. Mismanagement creatively of the roster. Somebody should have been getting hotter than hell in preparation for Steve.
Well, this is a dream angle, the WWF versus WCW. We had lived vicariously through these after magazines. What would happen if Hulk Hogan wrestled Ric Flair? What would happen if The Undertaker wrestled Sting? What would happen if Goldberg wrestled Stone Cold? We don't get any of those matches. Instead, we get this main event, and fans were excited. I mean, it set an all-time pay-per-view record for a non-WrestleMania show. Think about that. This beat every SummerSlam. This beat every Royal Rumble. This beat every Survivor Series. I mean, second only to WrestleMania. This is it. And they left, and they never came back, and the invasion angle continued, but no one cared.
No.
In hindsight, what could we have done differently on this show, if anything, Jim, to stretch this thing out and give this angle new life and new legs?
Oh God, I don't know. There's a million probably right answers, probably a million wrong answers, Conrad. You can't have a card full of cold matches. For sure. You gotta have matches or talents on these matches that people have made a confirmed and established emotional investment within. We didn't do that. The Austin turn would never happen if I'd have been booking it, because I was going to like you said earlier, and it's right. We had a door. The door was open to get the hell out of that scenario. Yeah. Right. But we still going to try it one more time. Let's keep trying it. It's just never, it didn't work. Wasn't ever going to work. So, and that's a shame. But the other aspect of it are things that were out of our control. Austin getting injured, Angle getting injured, Benoit getting injured, among others. And I'm sure there are other guys. Brock.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com.
In his movie career, which you can't blame him for that. I mean, hell, look what that's got him. I think last year he made $85 million. I'd say he made the right call.
He did okay.
Yeah. So things happened, and these were not just average guys we were losing. These are main event level established stars. And so unless you can wave a magic wand and get all these guys healthy and available, there's not a whole hell of a lot you could do. But the issue is to take a step or two backwards. Could the company have done more to get heels ready for Steve, get them red hot, white hot, and coming for Austin? Yes, definitely. So but other than that, man, the Austin turn was wrong, and people lost interest in us. Their savior, their John Wayne, if you will, no longer was playing that role.
I'm curious from your perspective, since you do have Paul Heyman running around representing ECW, do you think fans would have gotten with this a little more if Bischoff was running around as the WCW mouthpiece, or did that not really matter in the scheme of things?
I don't think it would have trumped the Austin scenario.
Of course not.
I don't think it would have trumped the fact that we didn't have anybody ready for Steve, and which he saw the writing on the wall.
I just think, especially with the Steve dynamic, if Bischoff is there, you could have turned the whole big thing with the whole Steve Austin, Eric Bischoff. Hey, I fired your ass type.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Eric would have played his role out perfectly.
Right.
Would he have been better than Heyman? Well, they're different characters.
Of course.
But they're both talented guys. And if based on what you're saying, and I don't disagree with actually, the fact that Eric could have played that Austin card. I FedEx your ass a letter that you're fired.
Yeah.
And so, and what are you going to do about it? Nothing. Whatever. And that Eric could pull that off like a champion. So that's another way of looking at it. You know, again, it's frustrating to look back at it 20 something years ago, Connie, but dadgum, man, it's easy to figure out problems in when they're in hindsight. You know, I could do a lot of things in my life over if I had the benefit of hindsight, and would have been made better decisions in a lot of areas. But man, oh man, he's just that would have been interesting. But again, we can't do anything about it but be frustrated about it again and say, well, I wish we'd have done this, we should have done that. Because at the end of the day, it seems as if, you know, it worked out for everybody pretty good. I mean, the monies came in, the being a publicly traded company for WWE, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, they financially, they ended up well. But in this 2001 interlude, the creative was not at its all-time best.
Let me ask Jim, do you think that because a lot of people would argue, hey, if you don't have the Flairs and the Hogans and the Nashes and the Goldbergs and the Stings and what have you,
yeah,
maybe you should just wait and do the Invasion angle when those guys are available. But it does feel like once we turn Austin heel and we see the pay-per-views and gates start to nosedive, maybe this is let's hit the panic button. We had this whole Invasion thing in our back pocket the whole time. We planned to do it down the road, but man, we're hemorrhaging cash right now. Let's do it now and try to make the best of it. And it worked as a one-off for this one pay-per-view, but then it starts to dwindle again. Do you think had the Austin heel turn not happened at WrestleMania 17, you guys still would have tried this Invasion concept in the summer?
I don't know why we wouldn't have, but it'd been different. It would have been cast differently.
Right.
The creative had been written differently. So they give it a whole different look. Yeah, I think it would have been a different piece of business, quite frankly.
It's also worth mentioning, you know, you mentioned The Rock, but Triple H is out here too. You know, he tore his quad.
Yeah.
Was on the shelf. You're missing a lot of main players. So it's not just, hey, there's a lot of WCW guys missing. Hell, there's a lot of WWF guys missing. The Rock, Triple H, Chris Benoit, on and on. It's a fascinating time to look back at, and we hope you guys have dug. What we tried to do here is we revisited one of the all-time pay-per-views that people will cuss and discuss and break down and dissect for years.
Yeah.
But for my money, Jim, it's hard to beat that Jeff Hardy, Rob Van Dam match on this show.
That's the best. It was the best by far. It wasn't even close. I don't even know who was second. Maybe the big 10-man tag with Austin's turn as far as a reaction was concerned. But it wasn't the reaction, as we thoroughly discussed, that the fans wanted to see.
Right.
They reacted, they made noise, but it was the wrong noise. So, but yeah, Jeff and RVD killed it, and they were the MVPs of that show without question. But I don't know. There's a lot of ways, boy, when you go back and look, well, what if you did this? Or what if we did that? There's a lot of what ifs, and that's the nature of the wrestling business. Booking, creativity, creative, and we had signs financially, and we had signs attendance wise, all those measurables. And then when you got you're going to be your top heel, selling more merchandise than anybody else. What all we need here? What more evidence do you need that this is the wrong strategy? And you know, as time would prove out, it was the wrong strategy.
Let's mention next week, we're going to be doing something that I can't wait to talk about. It's Triple H's 95 and 96 right here on Grillin' JR. We'll be back the first week of August doing an Ask JR Anything, which is maybe my favorite format. And then in a few weeks, we're going to cover Terry Taylor in long form, maybe one of the more controversial and misunderstood figures in the history of pro wrestling. We'll finish up the month of August with SummerSlam 2001, the follow-up effort from this Invasion pay-per-view. And we'll wrap up the month of August with the SmackDown series debut. It's technically the second episode because the first was sort of a pilot. But we got a lot of fun stuff planned here on Grillin' JR in the coming weeks. But what I'm planning to do this weekend is fire up the grill. And of course, I can't do that without my supply from jrsbbq.com.
I appreciate that. Hey, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm here at home, and I got plenty of stash. I got everything I need in my daughters and my two granddaughters are coming over. and Grandpa's going to cook.
Whoa. Do you still remember how to do that? You've been on the beach so damn long. You hadn't been able to use that grill like you used to. And I know you got a fine outdoor kitchen, but are you rusty? Do you know how to use that thing?
I'm going to practice today and tomorrow. Then they're going to come over. I won't let them down. I won't let them down. And so I enjoy cooking. That's cathartic for me. And I enjoy it. I think it's where the love of I'm a foodie, other than just being a big eater, which anybody can tell that can see me. I'm going to cook for them and grill, and they got the pool, all that good stuff. All the toys are there, the TV's out there, the whole 9 yards. Been very blessed to be able to do that. That was always Jan's dream, to have a big outdoor kitchen and have family events in our backyard. She didn't live long enough to get up to see all that done, but I always think about her when I have my family here or buddies over, or whatever the case may be. It's a great place to watch football games. But I'm, and of course, living in Jacksonville at my place, they don't allow grills. They have a community grill. I ain't gonna go cook on somebody else's afterthoughts. I'm just not doing that. So I'm gonna grill every day I'm home. And when the geography's right, with all these things coming on, we got so many big events. Chicago stuff is huge. The New York things are going to be amazing. I think the advances are really, really good, Conrad. So I'm able, because of the geography, to leave on our TV town on Thursday morning and come back to Oklahoma for a few days and head back out on Tuesday. And it's a great schedule. I'm blessed to have it. And sure do thank the fans for that. The TV rating from that Austin show, like you mentioned earlier, over 1 million viewers. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
For the little engine that could, and we're building momentum by the day. And we said this before, talked about this before a little bit, about our young talents getting accustomed to working TV matches.
Yep.
To take a tough scenario like the coffin match with Darby Allin and Ethan Page, you can't give those kids credit enough for how well they performed in a unique gimmick match.
I agree.
They told a great story. They took some scary chances, but they showed their nuts, so to speak, and worked through it. I thought it was just great, and I love the match. That I thought Carl Anderson had his best match I've ever seen him have on television against John Moxley.
Big time effort from Mr. Anderson, friend of the show, and Mr. Anderson, he's a griller too. He was telling me the other day that he's loaded up on your sauce over at jrsbbq.com.
He's the man. But he had a great match. And of course, Moxley's the second. Moxley's the closest thing I've seen in pro wrestling, like Stone Cold since Stone Cold. Attitudinal, body English, facial expression, in legitimate intensity, absolutely phenomenal. So, he's not one of those guys that didn't know how to do a TV match, by the way.
Right.
But we got some young guys that had not had that opportunity, and now they continue to get the experience. And when you work, I don't know how many 30-something shows or whatever it was in Daly's place, many without an audience, you got to pick it up. You got to learn to tell a great story. And I thought our guys are doing that. I'm just in love with this roster. I think they're just they're having so much fun. Conrad, think about this. You mentioned earlier in that show in Cleveland, how many talents on that show you think wrestled before 17,000 people before? The ECW guys, the WCW guys. Now, you can spread it around, and there's some. But what an experience that was for those guys that night.
Yeah.
And the same thing with these shows we're having now on Wednesday nights on TNT. The talents are loving it. They're realizing what true passion feels like in front of a live audience. And our audience, because they're younger, buddy, they come loaded for bear. They're bringing their signs and their posters. It reminds me of the Attitude Era as far as audience participation. So it's a really good time to be a wrestling fan, no matter what brand you support.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that, and I think you share the same philosophy. If you're a wrestling fan, be a wrestling fan of all of it.
Yeah.
Don't go out of your way to piss on something that's not on fire. just leave it alone. Support. And these guys are doing the same thing that if you're a fan and you could be a wrestler, that you would want to do. Play, audiences, full houses, all these things. So it's a great time to be a fan. And we're supposed to be getting our, I think my Stephen Link told me that we're getting our seasoning before the end of July. So we're imminently coming upon that. So, and I ordered enough. It should keep us in business for a while. And I didn't have no idea there's going to be such a run on that seasoning. So it's all going to be good. And this is a little tidbit news, breaking news, Conrad, breaking news.
Oh,
yeah. That I sampled our first version of the Red Ass JR hot sauce.
Yeah. Love that.
And let me tell you something. If you want hot sauce, I'm going to bring you hot sauce. This shit will light you up. But boy, it is good. It's really good. Got a nice aftertaste. And so that's coming up around the corner. So it's all looking up, and hopefully we're going to keep producing more good products, and the word of mouth spreads. At jrsbbq.com is the place to go, and we'll ship it to you. More often than not, we ship orders out the day we receive them. So the customer service is still the king in our place.
I've heard that routinely, man, that you're shipping stuff within 24 hours. That's jrsbbq.com. You can get your original sauce. You can get the hot barbecue sauce. You can get Chipotle ketchup. And of course you can get main event mustard, but stay tuned. The seasoning is coming back. It's great on everything from popcorn to eggs to barbecue to if it's protein and it's lean and mean, you need some of JR seasoning. But Red Ass JR coming to you soon in the form of a sauce, a hot sauce, if you will, at jrsbbq.com. Check it out. And don't forget, find Jim every Wednesday night. The shows are live and fans are back. And man, I have been a bit of a rut. I haven't found myself enjoying the shows as much in recent months, whether it was WWF or anything else, just because I missed fans and I didn't know that was it. But I watched that show the other night that you guys had with fans back. And of course, this weekend, as you and I are recording, WWE's back on the road. Man, the fans make all the difference. Wrestling was not intended to be in a soundstage. It was intended to be in front of fans, and it's back. So if you sort of strayed away and you're just really focused on the nostalgia, let me recommend you check out Dynamite this coming Wednesday. Hear JR and Tony doing their thing like only they can in front of a sold out, crazy, screaming ass fans. It's wrestling the way it's intended to be, Jim.
Yeah, our audience is priceless, and they were ready. They're supportive. They have fun, and they make all the difference in the world. As a broadcaster, just to walk out there and to get an ovation of whatever level you get it is just that adrenaline rush that you need, that you can't get anywhere else. You know, I saw something The Rock wrote the other day about, you know, he always said that he loved doing TV wrestling, live TV more than anything in his world, because it was spontaneous, it was natural, organic, and real, as opposed to, like you said, a sound stage where you're cutting a scene for a movie in a sound stage or something like that. So it's just nothing, you can't compare it. And what I love is the look of astonishment.
Right.
Well, some of these young kids, when the look says to me, everybody was always right. There's nothing like fans. I have never experienced anything like, especially a lot of our guys come from the indies, Connie, you know? So shoot, they're experiencing something they've never experienced, and they've only seen it on television a few times, because a lot of them grew up watching Monday Night Raw or whatever it may be back when it was good. And so anyway, I'm really blessed that we're in this situation now, and we got some great shows coming up. If you're going to join us, aewtix.com is the address for our tickets, and you can get all the ticket information you want. But we've got some big shows, and we're selling a lot of tickets. Oh man, it's good. So
a lot. The pay-per-view sold out immediately, and there's a ton of other big events, including the big debut in New York at Arthur Ashe Stadium. Check it out. It's aewtix.com and jrsbbq.com. Barbecue and wrestling go together like peas and carrots, and we hope you go together with us next week. We talk about Triple H's 95, 96 right here on Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
And don't forget our old radio show, some WSB that Conrad's got hooked up on the ad-free network. I get a lot of positive comments on that deal too. So life is good. Ad-free shows is the way to go. And Conrad, I appreciate you so much. And let's compare grilling notes this weekend. See what we're both cooking. It'll be protein heavy, I can promise you.
My house too, man.
Yeah, I may not be grilling a lot of broccoli or asparagus. Not that I can't.
There will be some chicken, some pork, some beef. JR's BBQ can hook you up with all three.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know what I like doing sometimes? I got these 2 or 3 different pans, pan mark. I like cooking bacon on my grill.
Oh, hard to beat.
Buddy, tell me. That makes the BLT a real BLT. I'm telling you. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us, and check out the websites and all that good stuff. We love your business. We appreciate your business and your support. It means the world to both Conrad and I. So thanks, and have a great week, everybody.
Oh, here's the spoiler, Jim. The ad-free show is exclusive. Your studio session, your old radio show, new one we just uploaded, has you not only interviewing Van Hammer, who Arn and I recently talked about, was here to save the promotion, but also a very young Kevin Nash, who's still Vinny Vegas. So here, Kevin Nash as Vinny Vegas talking to Jim Ross. Man, it's something to see. It's adfreeshows.com. You get all these shows early and ad-free, plus lots of bonus content like these old studio sessions you can't find anywhere else at adfreeshows.com. And we'll see you next week right here with Triple H 9596. See you next week, folks.
Be well, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.